Think about access to different opportunities. Hey, Maddie. So fairness, particularly for those who have been maybe excluded from different opportunities over time and in history, but having access to opportunities and having fair processes where everyone can participate. Mhm.
Thank you for those points. So as you talk, hi Maddie, how are you?
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys?
Good,
Great,
good,
Maddie. Good to see
good.
you again.
So as you
Awesome.
were as you were talking about that, I know that some people have been talking about that, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's like we're giving somebody an opportunity because they're non-white, for example, right?
Mm,
So
hmm.
we're letting them to, allowing them to come into this board meeting or allowing them to come and work for this organization because the company gets to check off the box, right?
Hmm.
And I think when I was listening to and reading some of the articles, I feel like they're almost trying to send a message that as if people of color don't have the qualities, the aptitude to perform the job, right? So
Yeah.
yes, race is in place. So I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about that, about because I saw it a lot this past week. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're being hired because of your race versus because of your qualities.
Yeah, and they're using the term merit a lot. So having individuals either hired or participation based on their accomplishments or some of their achievements, might maybe education or kind of um, kind of climbing up the ladder or something like that in their companies. But yeah, it is this impression that to have diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't mean that you have accomplished and uh, people that have actually achieved. And so you're right, there is this tension. But the reality is, even for individuals who have goals related to diversity, you still can't hire someone. Well, you can hire someone that's not qualified, but that's not the goal. If you think about diversity, equity, inclusion for your company, you want to hire individuals that are going to contribute in a positive way. So, yes, you have individuals that have to be qualified for your role or qualified for certain positions. But another piece to that is recognizing that many times the pools that we're trying to draw from don't have a lot of variety. Another big thing for companies too is that if you're trying to break into a market, let's just say, you know, um, you know, many Latin Americans aren't buying our product. What can we do, to actually engage and increase, even if it's just a financial motive, just a bottom line? Well, you should have a goal to maybe engage with the community, or maybe have an individual that can effectively engage with the community. Maybe someone from the community to do that. So you're absolutely right. Um, it seems that in order to maybe accomplish things and be excellent in the work that you're doing, they're assuming that they're you're probably heard as DEI hire, that someone supposedly isn't qualified in some way.
Yeah. That was an interesting point. And then also, like for example, in in the educational realm,
Hmm.
where you might have a school where 80% of the population are African Americans or
Hmm.
Asians or Latinos or whatever, just students of color, then I would think it would be a better fit to have leadership that would kind of represent the population.
Hmm. Especially be effective, and that's what even research says there. It's something about, if you think about even the type of teachers, instructors that students have, counselors, whoever is engaging with them, they usually will have a positive experience if they share at least a background from these individuals. And so you're right. And what tends to happen if they don't have individuals that maybe they're role models, or maybe have different opportunities to engage with their own culture and their own identity, they don't stay. And if they do stay, it's usually a tough road for them, meaning that it's tough for them to engage. They may not do well academically. And particularly if they stay, they usually are racking up dollars in debt as well. But it's usually positive if we can engage them. Either they're creating their own communities, but ideally having professionals in their lives to be positive and engaging role models for them. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely agree with that.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, In my business, I'm starting to see more and more Latinos come look for my services, right?
Uh-huh.
And automatically I get excited just because they're Hispanic, because I'm Hispanic. But I just see, how we always say we contribute to the economy. I think we're at 3.7 now, so
Mhm.
3.7 trillion dollars.
That's great.
And so our economic power, right?
Mhm.
And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are in reference to the boycotts that have
Uh,
happened.
it's been interesting, and especially depending on the region where there are boycotts. Some of the earlier, well, first of all, I appreciate that at least the community is recognizing what's going on, because I think it's very easy to just continue living your lives and just accessing the things that you need, and not giving a care about decisions that companies are making. So I appreciate that you have communities that are looking at, wait a minute, you're changing your mind about maybe having representation from my community, or um, having products that serve my community, um, having different vendors available, that actively serve my community or represent my community. And so I think it has been a positive thing. And I've been most grateful for those efforts that have been organized. So many times you may have individuals, especially on social media, and I'm not on social media, I'm not big on social media, but you know how individuals may have an opinion about these things that are happening in companies, but it's different when you move with your feet and your dollars. So to actively have folks saying, mm-mm, Target, nope, you're not getting it, until we have some changes. Um, Another piece that came out of that is not as popular of a conversation, but it's a reality. So when these companies actually had diversity goals and they had maybe products or different businesses, particularly small businesses represented, there's this challenge of, well, we want to boycott, but also part of that boycott means that sometimes these small businesses or these individuals may
Mhm.
not either have a place in the store or they'll lose money as well. And so I know that there was some tension there. Um, and for some, they were all about maybe understanding, that they wanted to make a move, the community wanted to make a move on these companies. But also you have individuals that contribute a lot of money to at least have some place in the system. So I know it just hasn't been an easy move, but the reality is folks are paying attention and they're doing something about it.
Yeah, it's a
What do
big
you,
impact. What do you think about that, Maddie? Because I know you're in the financial world.
Yeah.
oh no, definitely. I was gonna ask before I put in my 2 cents. What do you think is gonna take for us to have faith in those companies again? Is it is it just them checking a box and say, "Oh, we're back to our DEI program"? I mean, like, what is it gonna take?
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. I think many of the companies just have to, and it sounds bad in its time. We're hoping that eventually the dust will clear and all these tensions, particularly we're getting from the federal government, will kind of go away. But you're finding a lot of companies having alternative plans. So maybe they're not having explicit diversity, equity, inclusion programs, but maybe they're having something related to outreach, where they're trying to engage. So they're changing their language and in some ways changing their approach in order to still have
Mhm.
access to communities and a lot of diversity that they're wanting. Um, and another quick note, Maddie, this has been really interesting. And it didn't make a lot of headlines. There were a lot of companies that, when you think about summer 2020 in response to Black Lives Matter and so many other things, you had all these companies that were making promises, um, wanting to have goals specific to their companies. Um, some of them quietly changed those goals, for a variety of reasons. Could be, maybe they had financial complications or competitions. Some of them actually made promises without actually creating opportunities in a legal way. So they were vulnerable because they didn't do things legally. Another thing is there were so many companies that made promises to only a specific community while you had a variety of communities represented in their companies. So you
Mhm.
had the companies and employees saying, well, but what about us? So there were companies that were actually kind of backing up a little bit, not necessarily doing away with their DEI programs, but kind of backing up on promises in some ways. We're kind of seeing a similar thing now in that those that have been most vulnerable and probably just didn't do it right um, are the ones that are probably more immediately backing out from things. And the other thing is we have to look at what are they backing up from. So, for instance, when we
Mhm.
see people saying they're rolling back DEI, um, sometimes they're keeping their training, but they may do away with their programs, like social programs or something like that. Some may do away with the programs and training, but are still trying to keep the variety, supplier diversity, like the vendors, et cetera. But I do think that companies have to show that and still express that they care about the people in the communities.
Mhm.
I do think that they need to consider alternatives and also make those alternatives known. Um, I do think time is going to be a big factor because, again, so much is happening and so much is happening quickly that I do think that over time they're going to have to reclaim, have a deeper presence, um, sometimes even coming up a few dollars to kind of support initiatives that are really connected to and supporting and uplifting communities. Um, but time, I'm interested in that as well, Maddie. I don't know for some companies what route they'll take, particularly if they're um, concerned about politics, the ongoing politics.
Mhm.
And the last thing I'll say, we're also waiting for a lot of these litigations, a lot of these court cases to kind of clear up. I do think that once some um, wins that we have in the courts may open up avenues for us to kind of reinforce what we're doing, go back to what we were doing originally, and I'm saying we like for all companies, or have an opportunity again to do things in a new and a better way.
It's interesting how it sounds to me like we're getting rid of programs, grants or funding is going to be, eliminated for DI training, or we may have to uh, find funding for marketing to win back the trust of the public. They're
Yeah,
going to have to like really
Mhm.
go hard with marketing campaign to get the trust back. Because I know, Target. I know the Latino freeze was basically Target, Walmart, McDonald's,
hmm
some of those companies, and it has really impacted, their numbers
yeah.
tremendously.
And some folks are looking for private monies. Um, so you have at least some colleges and universities that have access to some federal funds, usually grants with research and things like that, or maybe special projects. Um, but was still able to at least have some outreach initiatives, still engage in some ways. But it's also depending on the type of monies that we're using. Because companies will have federal money, they'll sometimes have state monies, and then they'll have those private monies um, where it comes from donations or working with just private industry. But I agree with that too. It's going to take some dollars to get back and gain that trust and having that presence.
Hmm. Maddie, what have you seen in reference to the boycotts, or how people are spending money, and since you're in that world?
Yeah, I was gonna say we it's just so much uncertainty,
Yeah.
and people are just nervous, it's like they don't know what to expect. And, in the financial world, all we can do is use the past as reference for how we're gonna move forward, and the trend is this is what has happened in the past, and that's kind of how the decisions are made for the future. So for example, like right after the elections, we were expecting, rates to go down because that's
Mhm.
what happens after, when you're getting ready for election, rates start going down a little bit, and then when, once the new administration takes over, it goes down for a little bit, and it takes about 2 years for it to kind of even out, and then, we kind of see where things are. This time it didn't happen. We were expecting, waiting for the rates to go down, and I think they went down 0.5%, and then the new administration took over and they went down 0.25%, and then nothing has happened. So we have stayed still, and so again, the bank has made decisions to, for example, their investing rates, their CD rates, are this because the rates are going to go down, and then here we are 6 months, what are we, 4 months into it, and
Yeah.
it's like the rates haven't changed, so we're having to change the strategy. Also, a lot of clients, again, because of the uncertainty, I've seen a lot of my Hispanic clients, send their money to their countries, and it's like, or taking their money out of any long term, and putting it maybe in something liquid in case they need easy access to their funds. So, we've seen a lot of, like, I don't want to tie my stuff up for too long. Even people that were working on building new credit, like the secure credit cards and things like that. It's like, I don't want to do that anymore because I don't know what's going to happen. So it's a lot of fear because we don't know what's going to happen and how things are going to react. So, and I've seen that from the Hispanic clients and the non-Hispanic clients too, So again, is that fear of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. So that weighs in whatever decision I'm going to make when it comes to my money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Vidal, can you tell us a little bit about the anti-DEI and just what the government is doing and how that's affecting? I just see how the Board of Education, I'm big on academics, right? So everything that's happening with the Board of Education and how, we're eliminating training for certain teachers, or the state has to become responsible for certain things. And also, how is this being monitored?
Well, I'll start with this. Really, the anti-DEI, I've been calling it a movement, and I'll tell you why I call it a movement. It has been, particularly in the last year or so, organized. So these aren't just angry folks that don't want to hire brown and black folks in their companies. It has been organized. And that's why they've been able to kind of drop these bombs and coordinate in such a powerful way. So actually, the anti-DEI movement kind of started before even we had a transition in administration. So it started before January. And there were a couple of organizations that have really been helping with trying to gather data on DEI, especially professionals. And not only professionals, but the monies that have been spent on these type of activities. It was difficult for this group. One of the groups, and particularly since it's related to education, is a National Association of Scholars called National Association of Scholars. And they actually have branches in different states. And there is one in Virginia. And what they've been doing is actually a lot of research. They try to gather all the data to present arguments against this work. And then usually they'll try to submit it to state government. And then, of course, over time, they send it to federal government. So they really attack those who have big dollars. So think about the University of Virginia, University of Michigan. These are folks that have a lot of money, and then they can set up a lot of different structures for this type of work. And so they use that as ammunition. You have universities that have spent millions of dollars related to this work. And so for those that don't understand it and are hearing that, like, wait a minute, how are these universities spending millions and millions of dollars? They're saying we can do away with that and get scholarships. Scholarships for who, first of all? But they really attack those who have the heavy dollars and then just the big bureaucracies. Right? So when things were shifting and there were attacks on the Department of Education, one of the things that's driving this and that is most challenging is that the federal government actually hasn't defined diversity, equity, inclusion. And then they use language of targeting particularly colleges and universities or some companies that are using illegal DEI practices. And we don't know what those things are. Now, we do know that they're related to hiring and selection. So for colleges and universities as admissions, to make sure we're not using race as a factor in admissions decisions. But what they're wanting to do is actually translate that across the board to stop programming, to stop scholarships, to stop all these different elements within colleges and universities. So what's happening is that things still aren't clear, but you have some colleges and universities that are just wanting to respond because maybe they are setting up things where they are vulnerable to be targeted, or they're just afraid. One of the things that you may be hearing is that if you don't do this, we're going to take your money away. And that is big. especially federal monies that we rely on, again, for research, some of our vendors. Sometimes you may have positions that are totally funded by federal dollars. So it creates different types of waves. And the last piece that I'll add to that is um, the court systems have slowed some things down. I think we'll get more clarity. Um, but in the meantime, folks are still trying to make moves and survive, not on the federal level necessarily, but sometimes the state and local level. Because a part of that organization is that you have planted throughout different organizations and different settings people that are representing those ideas about the anti-DEI movement. So we probably place someone on a school board. We probably place someone on some council where there's momentum. It seems like now on the ground to really move and dissolve a lot of this work, and we're seeing that. So here in Virginia, we got UVA, um, Virginia Tech, I want to say VCU, the Virginia Community College system. That shocked me. All that shocked me. But then also larger schools outside of Virginia, Michigan, and a number of the schools are attacking as well. So it's anti-DI, and it is structured and organized this time in a powerful way. Many folks, when that Project 2025 came out, didn't take it seriously. But if you talk about dismantling the Department of Education, dismantling diversity, equity, inclusion, and changing all of. If you look at it, check, 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 check. They're working through that document. Yeah, and I do
Yeah.
think I call it a movement. Yeah,
Yeah. I would say that's a good way to describe it. And it's moving pretty quick too.
yeah,
And I'm just curious the impact, what the end of 2025 is going to look like. I know a lot of people have lost their jobs. Um, I was in a social gathering yesterday, and it was just a lot of ladies with medical backgrounds,
yeah,
and they were just talking about how people lost their jobs, but I guess certain places, unions have been going in to defend, and some of these people have been able to get their money back.
yeah,
But one of the ladies mentioned that her husband were considering retiring pretty soon, but now they might not be able to.
yeah.
So it's making a lot of changes, a lot of financial changes and plannings that they've had. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that. That yes, you're losing a like for me.
Mhm,
I own a tutoring business, and how does DEI impact me? I could say it doesn't, but it does,
mhm.
because if I have a client and they lost their job because of this, then now my numbers go down as well. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about how the places that we don't think that it impacts.
hmm Um, I think one of the things, and it's going actually even going back to the Latino freeze and just the kind of boycotting, are rural communities. Um, those who specifically rely on certain industries. So you have that small town that really relies on that Walmart, may have an issue with how Walmart is operating, but you mo- that may be the place where I get everything I need for my family. So those tensions. You have organizations that are also trying to find alternatives within their different settings. So, for instance, um, instead of just doing away with all of the folks that were tied to the DEI offices, we may have to reassign them in some way. So, are there certain parts of the office that actually connect to other functions of institutions? So, for instance, folks may where they can. This isn't everybody's case, but where they can, could they possibly be reassigned to community engagement? Now, or some folks are just totally going into compliance, like the Title IX, EO, things like that, where it doesn't provide kind of the social and engagement pieces for. Um, the other piece is, of course, the increase. We're expecting unemployment and folks that are trying to make career transitions. Sometimes that takes time, meaning not only just finding a job, but sometimes they have to upskill. And all of our communities can't just do that quickly, or they may have to invest some monies in order to do that. And so I do worry about those, particularly communities of color and those who don't have the resources to actually make those transitions into either a different job or a different field. And I think the last piece, again, that is concerning and kind of related to your question. And I already know I'm going to be thinking about that question for a while because there's a lot of thoughts, and then there are questions I even have about it too. I'm just curious about it. You have folks that are have been in these high profile positions, have actually done great work, have actually made inroads to a lot of communities. And to have those things dismantled, it is this broad ripple effect. Like, to dismiss things within higher ed related to DEI, you also have pipeline programs that trickle and affect folks and students as early as elementary school. Um, you're going to see maybe a decrease if we don't find some alternatives, and folks either entering, particularly people of color, entering certain disciplines, because there's no opportunity, there's no coaching, no mentoring, no opportunity, no representation. Again, so I think there's a lot more to that question. That's what came to mind for me immediately, because I even want to go back and even look at that a little more. We know that there's an impact, but how broad is it and how deep does it get? And I worry about, even for higher ed, the local community, and then also secondary elementary schools, community colleges as well. Any of those pipelines that we aren't necessarily considering. And that's even the case with some companies that have pipelines to management, that you have ways to kind of coach and mentor folks to leadership within those companies. Well, they'll either slow down or at some point no longer exist unless we find some way to fight this and find alternatives.
Mhm. Maddie, have you seen any changes in the corporate world in reference to training staff, or have they had any, from the higher ups, has there been any conversations with you guys in reference to changes that are coming?
Um, I'm not gonna say yes, because like Vidal was saying, like, you don't feel like the impact is not from one day to the next. It's like little changes that happen, like a little bit over time. I do remember, of course, my company has been in transition for a little while because we went through that big merger about 3 years ago. So the way that we do business is, a little bit different. But I do have to say, like, for example, I know that the company, when we were the previous company that we had like specific branches that were targeted to like different segments of the community. Like, we had Hispanic branches, African American branches, we had Asian branches, and all of that change with the new company. We do still have employees that serve those communities, that are still in place, but the branch is no longer designated a multicultural branch specifically to that ethnicity. So again, we didn't radically change and say, we're going to take Maddie out of that branch that serves the Hispanic community, but we no longer are calling ourselves, this is a Hispanic multicultural branch. Does that make sense? So they didn't make the drastic change, but the change was made, So, and I think it's, it has been little subtle changes, and you can feel it. And I guess it's not too much, not to make people too uncomfortable, but yet, noticeable. So, and again, speaking out of my own experience, I can't go out there and say, yes, companies are doing this and this, but this is what I have seen.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. I just wanted to take a moment to say hello to Olga, and she also wrote, we have to say diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we only say the letters, we are condoning the new meaning, and it doesn't point the paint the entire story.
That's a good point.
There are many non-Black and Brown individuals who have also been benefiting from the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So Vidal, if you could tell us a little bit about that in reference to what Olga stated, in reference to how other individuals have also benefited. I know for me, in reference to, the DEI, I today always say diversity, equity, inclusion. I tend to shy away from just saying the initials because I really want people to know what those letters mean. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, about how non-Black and Browns have benefited from diversity, equity, and inclusion.
hmm and so I appreciate Olga's point too, because one of the recommendations is, particularly since DEI is being misused or used inconsistently, it is sometimes better, particularly when you're trying to speak against what's happening largely now in society, to say it out. Um, the thing is, too, folks are still using the acronym, particularly if it means something in their settings. I think one of the challenges that some organizations have had is that they actually hadn't clearly defined what I call operational language. Like you use diversity, equity, inclusion, but have you defined it in a way that your organization is really driven by it as part of your values, et cetera? So yes, I do agree with that. You know, we are saying DEI, but many times when we're talking with folks, they may confuse it with how sometimes maybe the federal government may be describing it, which hasn't been defined. And so, to Olga's point as well, diversity, equity, inclusion, remember, is representation. So it's not just racial representation.
Right.
So within our settings, and I think about the work that I do, I work with religious and spiritual groups. Um, I work with international population, which is another interesting conversation around this time too. You think about women, you think about sexual and gender diversity. We work with folks from rural environments. We work with first generation populations. So it's a variety of folks, particularly those that have unique needs, that also fall under that diversity, equity, inclusion umbrella. So it is broader than race. It's broader than race and ethnicity. But all the ways that folks are represented, and particularly the ways that they can create community or have unique needs and histories.
I wanna also to add, like I said, my organization used to have branches segmented, but we also had what we call business resource groups.
hmm
And before, the business resource group were, the African American women, and the Hispanic group, but we only, and the Asian group. So we had like 3 or 4 groups, and now that has expanded. So
Yeah.
now we have the generation groups. We represent different ages. We have the disability,
Yep.
veterans and disability,
Mhm.
disabled business resource group. So I have seen the expansion of it, not only being racial, but also, to include other groups as well. So
Mhm. And one quick point, I appreciate we bringing up this conversation. Um, Again, going back to the question that you asked about the impact, since a lot of these offices support and provide programs and resources for these other communities, you're dismantling these offices based on their understanding of race. But we're actually creating impacts for a lot of communities, a ripple effect for a lot of communities, because to dismantle the office, that support and research, they still need to be either reassigned or need to gain some direct support. So if someone may be in an office at a college setting, particularly, dismantle the DEI office, and they work with first generation college students, they work with women, they work with all these different groups. Well, you dismantle it with race in mind, but you've impacted all these broader populations as well. So I appreciate Olga presenting that and you're answering that question because it does create a wide ripple.
I wanted to ask you, are the work that you do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, is it being, can it still be done without it being called DEI? Like, I'm sure there's initiatives, to kind of continue the work. So I wanted you to maybe give us an example of what that looks like.
Yeah, and one way I sum it up, it's always going to be people work. It's always human work, and even over time, it's been called different things. So, like when I started the field, um, it was multicultural affairs or intercultural, something. And so, even those terms are coming back as an alternative. But there are ways to describe this work, and that's why when you asked about this defining diversity, equity, inclusion, there are always ways to talk about representation, expanding representation, or to have engagement with inclusion or fairness. So there are always ways to talk about this. And I think that's what's important for organizations. Maybe we're not calling diversity, equity, inclusion anymore, but we still want representation. We want fairness. We want engagement. So we do have to learn another way to talk about it, or organizations have to find ways to talk about it.
Hmm.
And then one thing that we being like I'm part of a national diversity officer organization, and this actually came up. It was even 10 years ago, but definitely most recently, in terms of 2 or 3 years ago, we just um, recognizing that the field and the work is changing. There are phases throughout time where the work, whether it's going to be affirmative action, whether it's multicultural affairs again, or whatever the work may be, things will happen in society where we have to kind of shift things, kind of change our language. Um, so once upon a time, we could, in a setting, say politically correct. Well, folks hear that now and they're like, don't use that term. Why? Because kind of similar thing. Some folks took that term and just dismantling, inconsistently use it or use it in a way that appeared to be negative when actually it's basically using language that is part of a setting or would alienate you, that is just language that's part of that community or setting. So we had to do away with that. Folks didn't want to say politically correct anymore. And then they moved to something like inclusive language.
Mm-hmm.
So we shift, it's the same thing, it's the same motive. Now, inclusive language kind of expands it a little bit, but I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a movement that we have to adjust. So this is what's happening. So we have to expand and find these alternatives, and the overall work is about to change again. So that's what I'm anticipating.
Hmm.
I also think, it's like every time we moved into something new, it's like, or we changed the language a little bit, it's like companies want to measure the impact of this
Yes.
new
Yes.
change that they have introduced has made. And the only way to measure the change is to call it by a name or give it a label. And then when you start labeling and then measuring the people, it just turns into something else, because we always, like we always talk about race, and how we talk about race in the United States is not the same way we talk about race in our Hispanic countries, because it's just so different. So over there, you're like, oh yeah, you're white or black. What kind of question is that? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. And then you come here and it's like, are you black or white? And you have to label yourself, because that's the only way that the country can measure, okay, we have this many black people and we have this many white people. And while I understand it, it's like, okay, why do I have to label myself? But it's like a catch-22.
I agree with that.
Yeah, everything is data driven, right?
Yep.
Latinos, $3.7 trillion, which we love the data, we know when it sounds like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just, sometimes just it creates division, I think. It creates division. Like I was looking up, it says that African Americans or Black people contribute $1.8 trillion, I believe, right? Or something to the effect. And so, I don't know, like I would love for somebody or whoever comes up with these numbers to just, I don't know, why is it that we focus on, Latinos contribute this amount, or Blacks, Latino, versus, the United States, population contribute this amount of money, and maybe make it more age driven, or, something like that. I don't know.
Even education, like I would probably, even education, because if you think about it, the whole point is that, maybe people of a particular, cultural background don't get the same opportunities that the other, but yeah, I'm educated and I belong to this group.
It's also political power, though. So when you can show that these communities, hey, Latin Americans are spending this much money. We need to be looking at this population. We need to have products for this population. We need to get into that segment. So again, it's going back. You'll probably have these goals. We'll continue to have these goals because you're talking about 3.7 trillion, and you're a company. Come on now, we got to make business decisions. We might not call it diversity. Again, but we probably will still have a business goal to tap into that market, which I think is so important. But I also think for communities, it may sometimes help to show the ways that we are contributing economically to society. Because again, I think some communities, particularly brown and Black communities, they're not perceived as having merit and accomplishments, money, but we're contributing in such a great way. And so sometimes we have data and you present it in someone's face, and particularly someone who's your adversary, it's hard to deny. Now we're always challenging facts, we're always challenging data, but still to have that, just that data point and say, but we can't just dismiss this community. They're contributing in the trillions. So what is our plan now? I think
Right.
that's gonna be big. Mhm.
Right, right, yeah. Olga calls it political and economic power.
I agree.
That's what she
Yeah.
posted.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I just think like, I love saying that number because I know that I
Yeah.
contribute to it.
Yeah.
I get excited. um, but yeah, so I definitely spread the word in reference to that. I just think that the even within our community, how Colombians, Ecuadorians, Dominicans, there's somewhat of a division a little bit amongst us here in the United States.
Yeah.
And I love the impact of unity, of people coming together. So even the boycotting, and people have really stuck to it, and like I don't go to Target. I personally do not go to Target. I had stopped going for a long time, but not for that reason. But once the boycott came in place, I definitely do not go. Even though like there are some products, and when I my marketing classes that I've taken, like Target comes up there. Target has good, strategy for marketing along with Chick-fil-A. They're like the
Mhm.
top companies. Um, but I know before Target had a lot of diversity things. Like I know their
Yep.
clothing,
Yep.
LGBTQ. I remember seeing hair products for mixed people that had,
Mhm.
mixed hair. So I haven't, like I said, because I haven't been to Target. So does that mean that those products are gone? Is that what that means? Is that part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion?
That's not my understanding. I think the efforts to diversify, like the programs that probably got those products there, I think they may be in those types of programs, because they intentionally went out, and even a number of colleges and universities, we have intentional efforts to target small businesses, women's and minority businesses. And so those may be challenged at some point. But those organizations, they had initiatives to actually target these women's businesses, minority businesses, to have that representation. Now, my understanding is that that doesn't mean they're removing what's currently there, but I think that an intentional energy to kind of further access partnerships, et cetera, for some companies won't exist anymore.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they're not removing the shelves. I think the challenge is, though, you may have these vendors are saying, but you've backed out on this DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion initiative. I don't want my products there anymore.
Right.
So you have some companies that may be making those decisions as well.
Hmm. That's interesting. And then tell me a little bit more about higher education. How is that impacting higher education?
hmm the biggest would be the federal dollars. So again, for federal monies and federal grants, um, it may be impacting some admissions processes for some folks.
Hmm.
Um, so they may be modifying those things. You have some institutions that have centers. Like I'm thinking about my undergraduate, we have Hispanic Cultural Center. You may have a Black Cultural Center. You may have all these different things that exist, that have probably been there for, goodness, decades. I'm saying decade, but long time.
Hmm.
Um, but they could easily be changed and modified or dissolved in some ways. And so we kind of talked about the employee pieces. We have some offices that may um, employ up to maybe 60 folks, and you just can't easily place them. So you're thinking about having a great number of folks that may be unemployed.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the other things that we are discounting, um, how the changes and all the challenges, particularly with diversity, equity, inclusion, are impacting our partners. So, for instance, we rely on a number of nonprofit agencies. We rely on a number of folks that are actually getting federal dollars, and they support the things that we do. So these smaller agencies are greatly impacted, and we may rely on them for maybe some of our educational initiatives. Maybe we rely on them for a number of things. And so you have these large higher ed folks, or just a higher ed center, but also we have a lot of partners that may be impacted too. If it's either because we're directly impacted, or they're also because of the work that they do, since they work directly with people of color, these other communities. Um, if they're challenged, that means that we're going to be challenged as well. So it's indirect in a lot of ways. Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
How
we
did
are
you?
some things to kind of come down the pike, and again from the courts to further define things. I do worry how some folks, some institutions have just, even if their attorneys have said, we can just wait, some are still just changing language right now. So what you're definitely seeing across the board in higher ed is a change in language.
How did
It's,
you get into this work, Vidal?
oh
Sorry.
goodness. Um, I didn't even know this stuff existed. I was one of those. I'm a first generation college student. Um, Went to college, struggled a little bit because again, I went from a community that was predominantly African American and Latin American, and then predominantly white institution. And I'm looking around, where are my folks? How do I do this thing? So a part of my struggle was actually the early seeds of doing the work, and so I was able to do it at my institution as a student worker and things like that. Um, but and then also I think it's part of I hope it's okay. I can take it to this place. I do think it's part of what I call ministry or my giving. Um, Service is always going to be a part of that, especially to the vulnerable. And so I've always taken that as kind of like this higher type calling to some degree. And so it could be higher ed, it can be whatever setting, but I just always been called to this type of work. Um, I chose higher ed as a lane because it was just there for me. But I have kind of contributed in other arenas like corporate settings and then nonprofit, because again, in a lot of settings, you have folks that may be struggling or maybe disconnected, or the companies are disconnecting them because of who they are. And I've always been sensitive to that, and I think part of it because I felt that, and I don't want others to feel that thing. You know.
Hmm. I love it. So if this was your world, what would you do
Oh goodness.
to have it, the way it's supposed to be? What would you do? What's one thing that you would do?
Take out the list, Vidal.
I gotta think about that. Oh, that's a good question, though.
Or maybe
Um,
some stuff that maybe you've seen that worked,
hmm
that maybe could have stayed there longer or just altered it a little bit. Because I hate to reinvent the wheel, right?
Yes, I
Mhm.
agree.
So I think that there's a lot of things that have already taken place, but maybe they didn't stay long enough, or the right
Mhm.
people didn't, were there to implement and maintain it.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying to see if I can define this in a clear way. Um, I like networks, and I like networks and pipelines. Meaning, I like this idea of even in a college setting or university setting, that there's still a relationship with higher ed, secondary, elementary, community, in whatever sector, just all these different communities that can actually access each other and support each other. And
Mhm.
that comes from a place that I've always said this, and sometimes it hadn't been popular depending on the institution I attended. But I don't think an institution can provide everything needed for an individual or community. I always
Mhm.
think that we need to rely on the community, even if it's just having a community present, because we may not have a lot of diversity, but we know where diversity is in the community. Let's bring it there. And so, in my ideal world, I would just create, at least eliminate the barriers related to our accessing community, because a lot of us have the similar agendas. Um, and the community is just in different pockets, but we kind of create these barriers because we're a state entity, you're a federal entity, you're a nonprofit. Oh no, you're in finance. There are these barriers that exist, but kind of the groups that Maddie was mentioning, you have these different communities that are different organizations are still struggling with things that also exist in other pockets of the communities. So ways to kind of create connection, and where the pipeline comes in is that when you can reach back out to elementary and all these different schools or different settings and programs to bring folks in, teach them, model, coach, just provide an example of some ways. So not only connecting and being together, but how can we also show you how to be in this place and do well and be effective? So that's both a diversity goal, and you have merit because you're going to be qualified, you're going to be successful, you're going to be coached in all these
Mm.
different things. And so that's a place that's what I look for and even try to work towards. Um, but there are always barriers related to that. Always barriers.
Yeah, I love that because, and I'll give props to Hampton City Schools about this, but
Hmm.
they have at the high school level, the students they're in different academies depending on
Yep.
what field they want to go into. And
Hmm.
so what they do, one of the schools, these are students that want to go into academics, right? So whether it's teaching or consulting or something like that. So they work within their school system, and they come up with innovative ways to, you know, visit even local businesses, local daycares, or like myself, tutoring companies, and they can see all different aspects of that realm, not just inside of their classroom, not just in their books, not just on YouTube, but they really engage with the community as business with businesses and also within their school system.
Hmm.
um, and I just think that that's outstanding. One of their other schools, their academy falls under the legal realm. And
Uh-huh.
so they created their own courtroom inside of the school.
Very
So
cool.
they engage the community as well. And I just think that is very innovative. And I think it
Hmm.
speaks on the network that you're talking about.
Hmm.
I've also seen organizations, mentorship programs
Yeah.
where they have high school students mentoring the middle school students,
Yep.
and then the college students mentoring the high school students.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
all of that works amazing because you get to hear, learn, and teach others as well, which I
Yeah.
think is ideal, right?
Hmm.
Even as we dialogue, there's certain things that we're learning from you, but then you're learning from us, all
Yes.
because of
Yes.
dialogue and experience. And I think that's important. So I think you like hit it on the nail in reference to like, as we do things, right? And I think even in our households or the jobs that we have, to kind of bring that to the table,
Yeah.
to truly make impact. I think it's important.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, because I think if we don't voice it, and I think a lot of it is fear. We might not voice certain
Mm.
things. Like I sit on the board of like two or three organizations in my area, and I think I always say like this should be a place of transparency, right? Like no judgment. Like I'm here on the board, yes, because I check the box off of being a female Latina, but I
Mhm.
feel like I'm at the table also because I do have a voice, right?
Yeah.
And I do have the merit to be able to be there.
That's right.
So I think we should, as individuals, it doesn't matter the background, we should not have, don't allow fear to get in the way to present an idea that can
Yeah.
potentially work.
Yeah. And one quick note, I know we're about to get to close to closing an hour, even the power of just your presence. So just think about if you and Maddie showed up at one of these academies, and we have these Latin American students there, Hispanic students there, and you're just there and you're talking about your work and the ways you're contributing, even sometimes just seeing and hearing from you is a seed in itself. You're probably even
Mhm.
breaking a barrier that we're creating for ourselves. Like I've never seen someone do that. I don't think I can do it. But again, just your being there and sharing and being present, how powerful that can be for a lot of folks,
Hmm.
especially
Yeah,
young
it
people.
makes a huge difference. Yeah. Yeah, but yes, our hour is almost up. It went by
Oh
so
man,
quick. We were gonna talk about something else with Vidal too, but we didn't get to it. So that means he has to come back again.
I've really enjoyed this. Always
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah, I love, and I do want to say thank you to Pot TV because we do have such transparency. We don't have, there is no hidden agenda. We get to speak our thoughts and our reality, and you, it doesn't exist in many places, but it does exist here. So I just want to say thank you
Good stuff.
to the station, and of course to our producer Mark because he makes everything happen. But thank you, Vidal, for your time, and your expertise and your knowledge, and just your transparency. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you again, Maddie, as well. Just engaged. So I really appreciate you.
Yes. So Maddie, we're ready for your poem.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Vidal, for being with us today, and the information and the little tidbits that you always share with us. So thank you so much for that. And I think Viviana's point is a great transition to the poem that I'm going to share with you guys today. But before I get into my poem, I just want to say it is National Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month. So there's a lot of challenges. If you are online, social media, you get prompts every day, and we're supposed to write a poem a day. So by the end of April, you're supposed to end up with 30 poems. So this poem that I'm going to read today is kind of like a free write. It's not a whole organized poem, but it came from, I saw a commercial. This is an older commercial, and it's Serena Williams talking about how they call women athletes crazy, and how they are doing so many things, but as women, we get called crazy for showing emotion and for doing the same thing that the guys are doing, but we get called crazy. So that's where this poem comes from, and it's a little long, so hopefully I won't make it boring. And I'm sorry if I stumble along the way. But okay, definition of crazy. Mentally deranged, normal thoughts pattern interrupted, behavior manifested in an aggressive way, unstable, insane, unbalanced, great excitement, rage. Like crazy in a woman in survival mode, like crazy in the will of a woman forced to raise her children by herself, her body, the giver of life, the nurturer, the protector, the symbol of love in that life, like crazy in a Texas mom, Giovanna Cabrera, walking into the flames of her burning home once, twice, the third time losing her life attempting to save her infant son. At 8 weeks of gestation, the genitals of a male and a female baby look exactly the same. They come from the same tissue and they react the same. But if I act with the same aggressive raw emotion as my male counterpart, that is room for crazy. Like Serena Williams in 2018, voicing her frustration with the ref, costing her a point. The match, eventually 17,000, labeled emotional, unstable to control herself. Yet John McEnroe, legendary's persona, was built around his big outburst, feeling caged, limited, confined, repressed, not being able to express freely for being a girl. Do you know the word girl was used to describe a young person of any sex? And it wasn't until the 16th century when it became gender specific to the female sex. Mentally deranged for acting like a girl, that's crazy. Bobby Gibb unofficially finishing the Boston Marathon and not getting credit for it because a woman's body was not meant to run and the rule stated that a woman couldn't sign up. That's crazy. A few years later, KV Switz signing up for the Boston Marathon under the radar because no one knew she was a woman until her sweater came off and men tried to take her down because a woman didn't belong. Yet she finished the race, an accomplishment no one can take away from her. They keep calling this crazy. Crazy is believing you belong. Crazy is believing that it can be done. Crazy is pushing past the tears and the pain. Crazy is not being afraid to be the first. Like Mary Curie, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, but also the first woman to win it twice. Flojo running 100 meters in 10.49 seconds, establishing an Olympic record that still stands today. Simone Biles with the most world championship medals, 30 overall. So yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I am crazy because crazy is doing what others thought that couldn't be done.
Thank you, Maddie. That was awesome. And Olga is snapping her fingers as well. Thank you. That was right on point. So I just hope that you guys have an amazing week. And as our friend Tangi would say, have a great week on purpose. And Vidal will definitely be in touch soon, so you can come on and we'll keep the hot topics, with Vidal when we return. But I do hope this week is productive and do what you do, And we will see you guys next Sunday at 4:00 Eastern Standard Time once again with another exciting topic. Thank you, Mark, for everything.
Whether you're a seasoned designer, dabbler, or just starting out, this course is for you.
If you're watching this with your friends, you'll probably make a joke.
Because you know what you feel on the inside
isn't what you want people to know.
If you have to pretend to be happy,
find someone you trust and tell them.
If you get mad at things and you don't know why, or have thoughts about hurting yourself,
find someone you trust and tell them.
You are never alone when you share.
Seriously, people care about you.
It's okay to not understand what you're feeling.
And it's easy to think that you're all alone.
But you don't have to be.
You're never alone when you share.
Don't be ashamed to tell someone you trust what you're feeling.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Find someone you trust and tell them.
Tell a parent.
Tell a teacher. Tell a brother or sister.
Or just tell a friend.
You haven't done anything wrong.
Talk to someone.
Talk to someone.
It's how things get better.
Are just so impressed with them. Like I said, we've been with them for years. I will recommend and refer anyone to them. We stand by A+ academics. They're the best.
A+ tutorial really did help me with all my grades. They all went up when I came to this place. And I would say I recommend this school to everyone.
So it's a really good environment to be in, especially for me because it makes me look up to my parents.
If you have students that need academic help, A+ Academics is the place to be.
A+ Academics, what a great place to go for academics.
It's just a really great place to learn.